Hello and welcome to the Warframe tier list. Today we'll be going over Nekros, and first things first, let's go into the build. So with Nekros, I have one build, though technically there are a couple more. It is a Nourish Health Tank build, though you can play as a Shield Gate frame pretty easily. You'll just need to take off Health mods and Arcanes, and slot Augur mods and Brief Respite. However, I find that Nekros is tanky enough for the content to where you would be playing as a solo Nekros, not just as a dedicated loot frame, to where just playing him as a health tank and playing him chill is completely fine. The spoil is here to convert our energy cost to a health cost for our third ability. Uh, we can sustain this health even with base efficiency fine, and I'll get to that later. Shield of Shadows is here for 90% DR and also to give us status immunity, as Shield of Shadows gives you status immunity as long as you have an active clone up. Not clone. What are these called? An active shadow up. Creeping Terrify is here, so then whenever you use Terrify, enemies don't run off to Narnia and lower your KPM, so you could replace Creeping Terrify with something else if you want, but I found that I didn't really need to slot anything. I don't need more strength, I don't need more duration or efficiency. The only thing that I could really slot here would be something like Augur Reach for an additional 30% range, and I just found it unnecessary. Arcane Blessing for 1200 more max health, and Arcane Guardian for 900 armor. Growing Power plus Moderai pushes us to 220% strength, which is enough to get you to 90% DR from Shadows of the Dead with Shield of Shadows. The second build this is just what I use whenever I'm helping newer players doing like sub-level 40 missions, just helping them get some like Orokin cells or nanospores or something, and that's all there really is to it. And the third build is just what I run whenever I am AFKing in a party with somebody nuking enemies like a Korra or something, and just use Cloak Arrow with Empowered Quiver to give everybody status immunity and invisibility for survivability, and just have your 3 active. Not really much to it. So again, first build is mostly just for like actually playing the game. Second build is for just steamrolling over level 30 missions with Thermal Thunder, and the third build is just AFKing while somebody else does everything for you and you're just there to duplicate loot. Now as for the weapon loadouts, if you are playing a shield gate build, you can use whatever you want. If you're also just sitting there to pressure 3 and AFK, it really doesn't matter what you use either. But if you're going a health tank build, I suggest using the Paris and the Furus in conjunction with each other. The Paris is really nice as it has an Exilus mod that restores 300 health for every 3 status effects on the enemy whenever you hit them. This is applied retroactively on the first hit, meaning that with enough status chance and with enough multi-shot, you will heal yourself every single shot. With this build, you are applying Impact and Gas. You also are running Nourish on the main build, so now you have Impact, Gas, and Viral with an absurdly high status chance of 264%. This combined with Multishot from Split Flights, and ideally a Riven with Multishot, but you don't really have to run this Riven. You could just run something like Amalgam Serration instead of it. Vigilante Armaments for a bit of Multishot, or just Point Strike. I wouldn't suggest running Critical Delay. I would suggest running Point Strike. And the reason for this is because on bows, Critical Delay lowers your fire rate by 40%, and that makes the Paris uncomfortable to play. You would then have to slot a fire rate mod. Hunter Munitions also gives us access to a 4th status effect, so we are applying Impact, Gas, Viral, and Slash with this weapon, meaning that it is very easy to proc this mod to keep yourself healed. The Furus is the exact same concept, where you're just using it for Winds of Purity to keep yourself healed, and these weapons do so much damage that, well, the Paris, you just get free healing, like it's an Exilus mod, it's 100% free. But the Furus does enough damage, especially combined with something like Nourish, to where you can sacrifice a mod and kill. This Riven is a punch-through supplement mod, so without a Riven you would use Seeker. But ideally, you would have a Furious Riven, as no matter what roll you get, as long as it has punch through, it will always be better than just slotting Seeker. Melee is the Praetos for the parkour velocity and sprint speed, but feel free to use whatever you want. And Focus School, I suggest using Madurai for the 40% ability strength and 50% casting speed. Last but not least is the Companion, which is just a Panzer with the standard build equipped, though you can freely use a Smita if you're looking to get more loot. Now we'll be moving on to the rankings and discussing Nekros in relation to 4 separate topics. Firstly is KPM, secondly is survivability, thirdly is viability, and finally how funny is to play. All of this data is sampled from a 1-hour solo steel path mot run with no specters and no on-call. Now let's begin with the first topic, Nekros' KPM. Nekros, unfortunately, has one of the lower KPMs in the entirety of the game. The reason for this is because he doesn't really have anything in his kit to assist your KPM other than terrify. The problem is, while terrify does help you kill enemies quicker, it also makes enemies run to you slower. In fact, it does the opposite of that. It makes enemies actively run away from you, and it ignores line of sight, meaning that as long as they're within range, it doesn't matter if there's a wall between you and them, you will afflict them with terrify, and they will start running away from you. This does lower your KPM on most Warframes, unless you're running somebody who has a way to kill enemies through walls, but you can remedy this by running his augment for terrify, creeping terrify to slow enemies down. That way whenever they start running away, they don't run that quickly, and then you have time to just scoop them up and kill them before they get too far away. Now, all of this is pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, and again, like I said, Terrify at least gives you an armor strip, so it balances out because it gives you some scaling potential. The problem is, his fourth ability also lowers your KPM. This goes back to what I talked about a lot in the original Caliban video, where you have these enemies following you around. I also talked about this in the Revenant video. You have these NPCs following you around, and they kind of just have a will of their own, and they do whatever they want. What this does is it leads to them just going through doors, going down hallways, and diverting enemy attention away from you, which is a good thing for survivability, but that's not here nor there. But it just makes enemies not run up to you, and your shadows don't kill enemies quick enough for it to for that to be like a reasonable thing. You can't just let your shadows go do their own thing. You just let them group up all the enemies and kill them for you. They just do it too slow. Even if you armor strip the enemies with Terrify, your clones will still take a bit to actually kill the enemies. So you have one of your abilities actively making enemies run away from you, lowering your KPM, and then you have another one of your abilities summoning a bunch of NPCs that just go off, run to Narnia, and just divert all the enemy attention away from you, which can be a good thing for your survivability, mind you, but it just lowers your KPM. Another thing that can be annoying with his shadows is if you get a shadow of a Guardian Eximus, or an Arctic Eximus, or a Nullifier, they still actively block your own projectiles from your weapons, even though they are allied to you. And there's no way for you to just kill them other than just waiting for them to slowly bleed out and die, which that can take forever. There was one point in this mission where I had a huge Guardian Moa Eximus as my ally that was just blocking my shots for an entire 2 minutes, and it was just refusing to slowly bleed out and die. And I was purposely not recasting my 4 to heal it, and it still took 2 minutes. In this run, I believe I got roughly 105 KPM, which if this were a couple months ago, that would be completely fine. That'd be slightly above average for a gun frame. But the problem is, this is not a couple months ago, and there's been so much power creep for gun frames with these new Incarnate weapons that 105 KPM is honestly on the low side. And not only that, this was actually a very good room layout for Nekros. I did multiple runs. The highest I got in his absolute best room, and honestly, it might have been the entire game. It was like a connector elbow room. I got 110 kpm, and in this room I got roughly 105. Outside of those two runs, I was struggling to even get 95, as his shadows are just too good at keeping enemies off of you in separate rooms, so there's just never enemies on screen, and most of the different room layouts is Nekros. So I will give him a B- for his KPM because of all of these issues. Now moving on to the second topic, his survivability. And Nekros' survivability, on the other hand, is actually really good. Now you have your second ability, Terrify, that can be a detriment to your KPM. Now the fact that it's a hard CC that makes enemies run away from you, and I think it even, as long as you have Creeping Terrify, I think it even slows Xmas down that have Overguard, because you still strip their armor, and I think they still get the slow applied. So even versus enemies with Overguard, you still have a tool that you just press and it just slows them by 80%, which is really good for your survivability. That's one of the main reasons people use Gloom, which, by the way, Gloom Nekros is a build because the Gloom slow, Cold slow, which Cold's getting buffs, this would be even better, and the Terrify slow all stack together, giving you like a 99% slow, making you like immortal if all of them are up. So like Gloom Nekros is like really good for survivability. But in my opinion, he doesn't need it because I already think his survivability is good, thanks to Terrify with Creeping Terrify in conjunction with his fourth ability, giving you 90% damage reduction, making you immune to status effects, and again summoning 7 NPCs to divert enemy gunfire away from you. Most of the time that I was playing Nekros, I felt like I wasn't even getting hit. Like, there was a solid period where I could have sworn that I just had 0% adaptation stacks because nothing hit me for like an entire minute. And again, you could just play him as a shield gate frame too, like if you want to stay as like a solo Nekros killing by yourself for like a mission over 1 hour for whatever reason. I don't know why you would do that, but like if you wanted to, you could just play him as a shield gate frame, and he's not the worst shield gate frame either because he still has all these benefits. You can still run Shield of Shadows, get status effect immunity, so then you won't randomly get slash procs or heat procs, which are annoying for shield gate frames because then you have to reset your shield gate multiple times, which can consume a lot of energy and get you killed. You won't get CC'd and knocked over and die. You won't get energy leached, which can lead you dying of your shield gating. You still have the NPCs diverting enemy attention away from you, meaning that you have to shield gate less often, buffing your survivability. And then Terrify is still like a CC slash slow. So all in all, his survivability is actually amazing. This might be controversial, but I actually think that his survivability is like an S-, and that is what I'm going to give it. Now, moving on to the third topic, his viability, and this is a tough one because there are a couple routes I could go. Yeah, I'm gonna cut myself off here and just redo this and do it in a TLDR because I sat here and rambled for like literally 10 minutes on this subject. Essentially, if you care about loot, like you want like nanospores or polymer bundles or Orokin cells or whatever, technically Nekros is really, really good. However, if you're just trying to play the game, he's honestly pretty bad. There's only like a couple instances where he's actually good, and one of them is like so niche that I feel like it just feels like such a non-factor. The only place in the entire game where I can genuinely think that Nekros is actively good is he's good for super low level excavator missions because he has a chance to duplicate the power cell drops. But outside of that, he's below average like everywhere in the entire game. But if you care about loot, however, and a pre-made group, he's one of the best frames in the entire game. So I'm just gonna go average here and give him like a B. And even whenever, notice how I said he's only good in a pre-made group if you're going for loot, and the reason for this is because if you're solo and you're just trying to get some loot, you're better off just playing like a dedicated nuke frame like Saren or Mirage or Geyer, because the extra KPM that you're going to get is going to be significantly better than the loot increase that you'd be getting as Nekros. Or alternatively, you could just play Korra, who already gets high KPM and also duplicates loot just like Nekros. Now, moving on to the final topic, is he fun? And again, if you're just farming resources, he's one of the most boring frames in the game. Because your job as the Nekros is you will pressure 3, you might buff your team with like Roar or something, you might use Cloak Air to keep everybody alive, but after that, you're just going to sit there in AFK, spamming your transference button, spamming Magus Anomaly to get the enemies to the Korra quicker, or whoever's nuking the enemies quicker. If you're playing him by yourself, and you're not actively trying to get loot, you're just trying to play the game, and you happen to be playing Nekros, I actually think he's relatively fun. Summoner builds are one of my favorite archetype of just characters in games. I do not think that Warframe does a good job at it, but just the concept of it is pretty neat. I think Nekros is cool, and his overall gameplay is extremely chill, thanks to him just having status immunity. So you're not sitting there just sweating the entire time. So again, I kind of have to go like kind of down the middle here. I'm gonna go slightly below average here because while I do think he's fun, it's not like, oh my god, Nekros is the most fun frame in the game. And then like if you're playing him as just solely for a loot frame, it's like the most miserable existence you could possibly have. So I will give him a B- for his fun rank. In conclusion, Nekros is a pretty average Warframe sitting in the B rank. That being said, depending on how much you value loot, you could rank him lower or even significantly higher.